My name is Paula Harris, and I'm an international photojournalist, and I'm very honored today to be in Toronto, Canada, May 7th, 2010, to interview the Honorable Paul Hellyer. It's been a pleasure to return to Canada after my 2005 interview with Paul, when he talked about several controversial issues, one being the UFO question and the lack of transparency in the government cover-up. But today we are very honored because Paul has written two books, and we're going to discuss them on camera, and they are Light at the End of the Tunnel, A Survival Plan for the Human Species, and that's the book that will also encompass the ET UFO question, among other real serious world issues. And Paul's book on A Miracle in Waiting, Economics That Makes Sense. And this book for Paul is a real masterpiece of economics. He's done a great deal of study on this. So these are the two books that have just been released, and the debut of these two books. And Paul has kindly consented to answer a few questions that all of us have for him. Paul, in 2005 was an important year for you. Several things happened in 2005, the last time I was here. And since we're talking about Light at the End of the Tunnel, the book, was that part of your thinking in 2005 that you would come out with a book? And would you talk a little bit about that year?
No, at that time had no idea that I would write this book. It didn't take too long after that to decide that I wanted to write sort of a final book as a legacy. But in 2005, I was still getting over the death of my late wife, Ellen, and sort of living alone, and decided to ask the widow of my best friend ever, Bill Bussiere, if she would consider marrying me. She had been a widow for 10 years, and she said yes. So we planned our wedding for October the 1st, 2005, and that is the year that I really got interested in the extraterrestrial presence and technology. Really for the first time. I had been Minister of National Defense in Canada and had received reports on sightings, which said this one was a natural phenomenon, this was not explained, but never really been into it. But that year, I read Colonel Corso's book, A Day After Roswell, and came to the conclusion that it was real and that this was an important issue. And so I made a statement at an Exopolitics Symposium at the University of Toronto, and said UFOs are as real as the planes flying over your head, and that it's time that the United States government started coming clean on what it's all about, because there are very important military and economic issues that have to be addressed. And how can you address a question which relates to a subject that people don't even won't admit exists?
Can we pick up that last question, that last line?
Yeah. How can you discuss a question which the United States government doesn't officially recognize as being on the radar?
You told me also in an informal conversation that you thought this was going to be a one-shot deal. You thought you were just going to appear, I think it was the University of Toronto, and ask the important questions that you asked and make the important statements that you made, and then all at once, 5 years later, we're still, is it intriguing you? Is this
Well, I had no idea. See, this speech was made just a week before I got married, and I asked my future bride if it was okay, and she was hesitant, she was reluctant. But I said, well, this will just be a one-off shot. I'd want to get this out in the open for discussion. And she said, okay, to go ahead. Well, little did I dream where it was going to lead, because, of course, after I was public, then people wanted to talk to me, and I wanted to do some research. I have been saying that I was just in the kindergarten of UFO knowledge in 2005. I'm probably in grade 5 or 6 now, after doing a lot of research in the intervening 5 years, and I have read many, many books, and I now know more about the subject than a majority of people, and I felt when I thought of writing another book as a legacy that I should include a chapter, a primer really, on the subject of the extraterrestrial presence and technology, and also to make a plea for full disclosure, because the implications of what has been going on secretly in the last 50 or 60 years are really profound, and most people haven't any idea how important the revelations could be to their future as a species.
Paul, you said you became very interested in the question because of policy issues and sociological issues, and your book, Light at the End of the Tunnel, A Survival Plan for the Human Species, has actual first-hand information because you spoke to quite a few people. Some of the people that you spoke to are people like Travis Walton, Fire in the Sky, Colonel Halt from the Bentwaters case in England, Nick Pope, who worked for the Ministry of Defense in England, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14 astronaut Shirley MacLaine, and several other people who are first-hand sources for the whole UFO question. It isn't just that you read the books. Would you tell me, while you were speaking to all these people, what was going on in your mind and which person you found the most, not shocking, but the most impressive of all your research?
Well, when you use the word impressive, they were all impressive. So I wouldn't want to single out one for that. I first of all, as you know, was briefed by a number of very knowledgeable people, including Dr. Stephen Greer, who gave me a 3-hour briefing on the people that he had assembled, the 400 contacts of people from all walks of life who knew much from personal experience about this subject. And then, as I went along, I wanted to talk to other people, and for example, I wanted to interview a couple of contactees, and they included Travis Walton, whose story was just, tremendously interesting. And I talked to him for a long while, over a couple of days, and was totally convinced that he was telling the truth. But you learn a lot from talking to these people. He had a heck of a time when he was dumped off 5 days later after his abduction, convincing people that it wasn't all a ruse. And he said the division was about 50-50, about half of his friends and relatives believed him and about half didn't. It took him a long while to recover psychologically from the experience. Another contactee that I interviewed at great length was Jim Sparks. And Jim has been abducted probably more often than anybody else that I've talked to. And he was tremendously interesting, because at the outset he would fight these people and swear at them and do all of these things. Eventually he came to the point where he trusted them, and they trusted him, and he got a lot of information. And he wrote a book about his experience, and he gave me permission to use one of the most interesting quotes from that book, several pages actually, of a dialogue he had with the extraterrestrials, in which they indicated their concern about what was happening on Earth, that we were fouling up our rivers and our lakes, and fouling up the air that we breathe with particles, and really destroying our natural environment. And they're concerned about this, and they wanted him to tell the world about it. And so they of course encouraged him to pass the word along, which he's been doing both in lectures and through his book, but also to plump for amnesty for a lot of people in the event that the government does decide to open up the windows a little bit and let the light shine in. And the reason for that was because some of the people involved in what they call the black operations, the reverse engineering of the technology that came from the crashes and other contact with the extraterrestrials,